This story is titled, She Cheated with My Best Friend and My Business Partner. So I played dumb and took my nuclear revenge and left them with nothing. Hey everyone! I spend so much time finding these stories for you. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world and helps keep this journey going strong. Let's grow together. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, So, I 42 male, a self-made man who poured blood, sweat, and sleepless nights into building the life I always dreamed of. I've always been the guy with the plan. Every move I make is calculated, every risk measured. I've built my business, my family, and my reputation with my own two hands, and I took pride in being the guy who had it all together. My wife, Lisa, and I met 15 years ago. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room with her smile. She was charming, witty, and supportive. Or so I believed. When we married, I thought I hit the jackpot. Then there was John, my best friend since college. We were partners in crime, the dynamic duo. John was the guy I could count on to have my back, in business and in life. Together, John and I built a multi-million-dollar business. I handled the vision and the big deals, while he managed operations. We worked seamlessly together, and I trusted him like a brother. Life wasn't perfect, but it was damn close. But cracks started to appear. Lisa had been distant for months, giving vague excuses for late nights and sudden shopping sprees. I brushed it off at first. I mean, everyone has off days, right? Then, there was the time she came home wearing a diamond bracelet she claimed was on sale. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, but something about her story didn't sit right. Meanwhile, John started acting different. Meetings became less frequent, and his enthusiasm waned. He seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone during conversations. But I chalked it up to stress. Running a business is no walk in the park, and I figured he just needed some space. Still, there was this gnawing feeling in my gut that I couldn't ignore. My two most trusted people were acting off, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was happening behind my back. Then, it happened. One day, I was walking past Lisa's car in the driveway, and an idea struck me. A recorder. Not my proudest moment, but I needed answers. I slipped it under the driver's seat, fully expecting to find nothing more than harmless chatter. Boy, was I wrong. A few days later, I retrieved the recorder and pressed play. At first, it was just normal. Everyday conversations, calls with her sister, a chat with a friend about some new yoga class. But then, I heard his voice. John. The two of them were talking. About me. Henry is so controlling, Lisa complained, her voice dripping with frustration. He acts like he's the king of the world, and I'm just supposed to be grateful to live in his kingdom. I get it, John replied. He doesn't listen, does he? He's always so focused on work, on being the best. It's like he doesn't even see you anymore. I know, right? Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if I'd ended up with someone like you. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. My wife, and my best friend were talking about me like I was some clueless tyrant. And John, the man I trusted with my life, he was feeding into it, planting seeds of doubt. They didn't outright say they were having an affair, but the undertone was clear. There was something between them. Something that had no place in my marriage or my friendship, and they thought I was too blind to notice. At that moment, something in me shifted. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. These two people, the closest to me, were conspiring behind my back. They thought they could get away with it, but they underestimated me. Big mistake. Betrayal isn't a single moment. It's a slow burn that eats away at you. After hearing that recording, I sat in my home office, stunned. The betrayal from both Lisa and John hit me like a gut punch. I replayed the conversation a dozen times, dissecting every word. The more I listened, the more layers of their deceit became clear. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it's just harmless venting? Maybe John is just being a good friend? But deep down, I knew better. The way she spoke about me, the way John agreed so quickly, it wasn't innocent. It was calculated. For days, I carried this weight around like a lead vest. Every time I saw Lisa, it felt like a slap in the face. She'd kiss me goodbye in the morning, act like the doting wife, and all I could think about was how she had confided in John. The thought of John made my blood boil. This was the guy who had celebrated my biggest wins with me, stood next to me at my wedding, and now he was, what? Undermining me? Poaching my wife emotionally, or worse? I didn't confront them right away. I wasn't ready. Instead, I observed. And let me tell you, once you're suspicious, you start seeing things you didn't notice before. Lisa had developed a habit of leaving the house for vague reasons. Yoga, errands, meeting friends. I'd never questioned it before, but now every excuse felt like a lie. One evening, she came home late, claiming she'd been at a wine tasting with her sister. She smelled like perfume, not wine. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I kept my mouth shut. John started avoiding me. Meetings that used to last hours were suddenly cut short. He dodged phone calls and emails, claiming he was overwhelmed with work. The excuses were weak. This was the guy who used to thrive under pressure, the guy who could close a deal with his eyes closed. Now, he couldn't even look me in the eye. The breaking point came when Lisa mentioned a business trip John was taking. John said he's heading to Chicago next week for some big client meeting, she mentioned casually over dinner. My fork froze mid-air. John hadn't said a word about this trip to me. As his business partner, I should have been the first to know. That was the moment I knew something deeper was going on. The coincidences were stacking up, and I wasn't about to let them bury me under their lies. I decided it was time to act. I'm a meticulous guy. It's how I built my business. So, I approached this betrayal the same way I would tackle a hostile takeover, strategically. I started documenting everything. I combed through Lisa's credit card statements and found a series of charges that didn't add up. Hotel stays, high-end restaurants, spa treatments she never mentioned. Then, I turned my attention to John. I started paying closer attention to his work habits, or lack thereof. I noticed he was neglecting key accounts and failing to follow through on deals. It was as if he'd checked out entirely. I also began quietly asking around, reaching out to mutual friends and colleagues to gauge his behavior. The feedback was unanimous. Something was off with John. The pièce de resistance came when I managed to retrieve deleted messages from Lisa's phone. Don't ask me how. It wasn't exactly legal, but desperate times call for desperate measures. The text confirmed my worst fears. There were flirty messages from John, late-night exchanges filled with inside jokes, and even a reference to a special weekend they'd shared. I wanted to throw her phone across the room, but I kept my composure. If I confronted her now, I'd be acting on raw emotion. I needed a plan, a way to ensure that neither Lisa nor John could weasel out of this. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to dismantle their little charade piece by piece. One night, as Lisa slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I realized something crucial. This wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about power. Lisa and John thought they had the upper hand. They thought they could play me, use me, and keep me in the dark. But they underestimated me. They didn't see the storm brewing beneath the surface. I decided I wouldn't just confront them. I would destroy them. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming control of my life and making sure they could never pull something like this again. If there's one thing I've learned in business, it's that patience is key. When someone underestimates you, their guard drops. They make mistakes, and that's when you strike. Lisa and John thought they had me fooled, and I let them believe that for a little while longer. What they didn't know was that every move they made was feeding into my plan. I started with the business. John's position in the company was his pride and joy, and the foundation of his income. Lucky for me, when we started the company, I insisted on being the majority owner. John had never argued. After all, I was the one who took the initial financial risks. Now, that decision was about to pay off. I began quietly cutting him out. First, I started rerouting deals to myself and key team members I trusted. I reached out to clients directly, building stronger relationships and ensuring that John's involvement became irrelevant. Next, I initiated an audit, under the guise of streamlining operations, to uncover any discrepancies in the accounts John managed. I wasn't surprised to find a few questionable expenses. John's sloppy handling of finances gave me all the leverage I needed to legally terminate his partnership. But I wasn't going to pull the trigger just yet. Timing was everything, and I wanted him to feel secure before yanking the rug out from under him. Dealing with Lisa was trickier. I couldn't just confront her with the texts and recordings. I needed her to dig her own grave. So I started playing the role of the clueless, devoted husband. Romantic dinners, surprise gifts, even a weekend getaway. She ate it up, thinking I was just trying to patch up our rocky marriage. Little did she know, I was documenting everything. Her reactions, her excuses, and her lies. I also hired a private investigator. If Lisa was sneaking around, I wanted solid evidence. Sure enough, within a week, the PI handed me a folder filled with photos of Lisa meeting John at a boutique hotel. The timestamps matched the dates of her supposed wine nights. The PI also discovered something that infuriated me even more. John had been using company funds to book these rendezvous. They weren't just betraying me personally. They were stealing from the business I built. With every piece of evidence, I felt more in control. By the time I was done, I had everything I needed. Text messages between Lisa and John, loaded with flirtation and innuendos. Photos of their secret meetups, time-stamped and undeniable. Financial records showing John's misuse of company funds. A trail of Lisa's unexplained spending, which I knew would come in handy during the divorce. But I wasn't ready to confront them yet. I wanted them to feel safe, to think they'd gotten away with it. I played my part so well that Lisa even started being affectionate again. It made my skin crawl, but I kept my poker face. The perfect opportunity came when Lisa mentioned that John wanted to have dinner with us. "He thinks we've been drifting apart," she said, her voice full of fake concern. "He wants to make sure you're okay." I almost laughed out loud. The audacity of these two was almost impressive. I agreed to the dinner, knowing this would be the night I'd set the final trap. We met at a fancy restaurant, the kind of place where you have to make reservations weeks in advance. Lisa was glowing, dressed in a way that was clearly meant to impress John. He arrived late as usual, flashing his usual cocky grin. I played the gracious host, laughing at their jokes and toasting to friendship. What they didn't know was that I'd already tipped off the restaurant staff. Our table was wired with hidden cameras and microphones, capturing every word and gesture. As the wine flowed, they got comfortable. Too comfortable. Lisa leaned over to John at one point and whispered something I couldn't catch. But his smirk told me everything I needed to know. These two were still playing their little game, even with me sitting right there. That night, as Lisa slept beside me, I reviewed the footage. It wasn't as incriminating as the texts or the PI's photos, but it was enough to paint a picture of their betrayal. Combined with everything else, I had an airtight case. The next day, I met with my lawyer and laid out my plan. We drew up the divorce papers, outlining the terms of the prenup that would leave Lisa with next to nothing. We also began the process of removing John from the company, citing his financial misconduct. Everything was in place. All that was left was the confrontation. And trust me, I was ready to deliver the performance of a lifetime. The day of reckoning arrived, and I was ready. Every detail was planned, every piece of evidence meticulously laid out. This wasn't just about confronting Lisa and John, it was about making them realize the full weight of their betrayal. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to dismantle the comfortable lives they had built on the foundation of my trust. I invited John over under the pretense of a business meeting. Lisa was already home, lounging in the living room, completely unaware that the walls were closing in. John showed up dressed to impress, his confidence as irritating as ever. He greeted Lisa warmly, too warmly, and gave me a firm handshake, the kind meant to show camaraderie. "Big things happening, huh?" he said, grinning like the snake he was. "You could say that," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The three of us sat down in the living room. Lisa poured wine for everyone, playing the role of the gracious hostess. John launched into some small talk about potential clients, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. I let him talk, nodding along as if I was interested, but inside, I was counting down the seconds until I could drop the hammer. "John," I said finally, cutting him off mid-sentence, "do you know why I asked you here today?" He blinked, caught off guard. To talk about the new contracts?" I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Number, I brought you here because I think it's time we had an honest conversation about business and about personal matters." Lisa shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between us. "What's this about, Henry?" I ignored her, keeping my gaze fixed on John. "You've been lying to me, John. Both of you have." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, don't play dumb," I said, my voice cold. "You think I don't know about the two of you? The texts, the secret meetings, the hotel rooms? You've been betraying me, John, both as a business partner and as a friend." Lisa's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. "Henry, wait! I can explain." "No!" I snapped, cutting her off. "You've done enough talking. Now it's my turn." I reached for the folder I had prepared, pulling out the first piece of evidence, the text messages. I tossed the printed screenshots onto the coffee table. "Recognize these, Lisa? John? These are your little late-night conversations. The ones where you talk about how controlling I am, how much better life would be without me." John's hands trembled as he reached for the papers. This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I interrupted. "But if you need more proof, let me jog your memory." I pulled out the photos from the private investigator and threw them down. Lisa's face turned ghostly pale as she stared at the images of her and John entering the boutique hotel. "This is insane," Lisa whispered. "You've been spying on me?" "Spying?" I laughed bitterly. No, Lisa. I was doing what any man would do when his wife and best friend stab him in the back. I gathered evidence. John tried to recover, his voice shaky. Henry, listen, I made a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far. This far? I said, standing now, towering over him. You didn't mean to sleep with my wife while using company money to fund your little escapades? Tell me, John, which part of this wasn't intentional? Before they could respond, I shifted gears. And speaking of company money, John, let's talk about the audit. His eyes widened in panic. What audit? The one that uncovered thousands of dollars in unauthorized expenses, I said, throwing another folder onto the table. Care to explain why the company credit card was used to pay for hotels, dinners, and spa treatments? I've already consulted with my lawyer. Your partnership is terminated, effective immediately. You can't do that! He protested, his voice rising. We built this company together. No, John, I said, my tone icy. I built this company. You were along for the ride. And now that ride is over. Finally, I turned to Lisa. And as for you, I've already filed for divorce. The prenup is ironclad, so don't expect to walk away with much. And given the evidence I've collected, I'll be getting full custody of our son. You'll be lucky if you see him on weekends. Lisa broke down, sobbing. Henry, please, I made a mistake. I love you, I do. We can work through this. I shook my head, my voice steady. You don't love me, Lisa. You love the life I gave you. And now that life is over. John stumbled out of the house that night, a broken man. Lisa begged and pleaded, but I packed her bags and told her to leave. By morning, she was gone. I didn't feel victorious, not yet, but I felt free. I had taken control of my life again, and that was all that mattered. It's funny how quickly life changes when you finally take out the trash. The day after Lisa left and John was effectively cut out of my life, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Sure, there was anger, pain, and a tinge of bitterness, but above all, there was clarity. I was no longer tangled in a web of lies, no longer carrying the burden of betrayal. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The first thing I did was refocus on the company. John had been dead weight for years, and his absence made it clear just how much he'd been dragging us down. I assembled my team, loyal, hardworking professionals who had always been in the background, and gave them the reins to help me restructure. Together, we streamlined operations, brought in new clients, and even expanded into a few untapped markets John had ignored. Within months, profits surged. Without John's toxic influence, the company culture transformed. Employees who had once walked on eggshells around him now thrived. I saw potential in people I hadn't noticed before, and I rewarded their hard work with promotions and bonuses. The business became stronger, leaner, and more innovative than ever. The divorce with Lisa was swift and merciless. Thanks to the prenup and the evidence I'd collected, she walked away with the bare minimum. No alimony, no lavish settlement. Just enough to get by. The custody agreement was even more satisfying. I gained full custody of our son, Ethan, while Lisa was granted visitation rights. Ethan, who had been blissfully unaware of the drama, adjusted quickly to the new normal. I made sure his life stayed as stable and happy as possible. As for Lisa, she tried to reach out a few times, apologizing, pleading, even claiming she wanted to start over. I didn't take the bait. Her crocodile tears meant nothing to me anymore. Every time her number flashed on my phone, I ignored it. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. John's descent was as swift as it was satisfying. Without the company, he was a man without a purpose. His reputation in the industry was shattered after I made a few quiet calls to mutual connections, letting them know the kind of man he was. No one wanted to work with a backstabbing ex-partner who'd been caught mismanaging funds. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to start a new venture, but it flopped within weeks. His debts piled up, and he eventually had to sell his house. The last I heard, he was working a low-level job at a competitor's firm, miles away from the high-powered life he once enjoyed. With the toxic people out of my life, I focused on building something better, not just for me, but for Ethan. I hired a life coach to help me realign my goals, and started therapy to process everything I'd been through. It wasn't easy, but each session felt like shedding another layer of the pain they'd caused. I also started making time for the things I'd neglected during my marriage. I reconnected with old friends, picked up golf again, and even started volunteering at a local nonprofit that helps small businesses get off the ground. For the first time in years, I felt like me again. 6 months after the dust settled, I met someone new. Her name is Natalie, and she's the kind of person who radiates warmth and kindness. We met through mutual friends at a casual dinner party, and I was instantly struck by her authenticity. She wasn't interested in my money or my status. She liked me for who I was. We started slow, taking time to get to know each other, and over time I realized that not all relationships are built on lies and manipulation. Natalie met Ethan a few months into our relationship, and they hit it off immediately. Watching them bond was a reminder that life, no matter how messy, has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Looking back, I'm grateful for what happened. Not for the betrayal, that still stings, but for the wake-up call it gave me. I learned that you can't control what others do, but you can control how you respond. Lisa and John tried to break me, but they underestimated my resilience. I didn't just survive their betrayal, I thrived because of it. Now, my life is mine again. My business is booming, my son is happy, and I've found someone who truly values me. Revenge might have been sweet, but the real victory was reclaiming my peace and proving to myself that no matter how bad things get, you can always rise above. Lisa and John's lives continued to unravel. Lisa moved in with her sister, struggling to find a job that matched the lifestyle she once had. John, still floundering, occasionally tried to contact me, sending emails filled with hollow apologies. I never replied. As for me, I'm thriving. Revenge might have been the spark, but rebuilding my life was the fire that kept me going. And now, every day feels like a reminder that letting go of toxic people is the greatest power move of all.